I was this really super quiet, silenced little girl. I spent most of my life staying quiet. I woke up and said, something's got to give because I was just feeling this void. When She Rises Studios was birthed, it was birthed out of this moment in life when I needed a change. I had just received the worst news that I had been diagnosed with this crazy disease. My voice is no longer silenced anymore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Menopause Mindshift Self-Love Podcast. I am your host, Lisa R. Triggs, the Menopause Queen, and we are shifting the way women do menopause. And I have a very special guest with me here today. I have the wonderful Hanna Olivas. She is an amazing woman. She is the mom of five, a best-selling author, CEO and co-founder of She Rises Studios, She Wins Network, Phoenix TV, known PR, Sheconomy creator. They publish books, podcasts, TV shows, summits, retreats. They have 13 magazines that come out monthly, weekly newsletters, and she's working on something big that's coming early 2026, which I'm sure we'll get into and she'll talk about. Thank you so much, Hanna. Tell us a little bit about you, your story and how She Rises Studios came to be.
I was born and raised in Vegas. I was this really super quiet, silenced little girl. I spent most of my life up until about 5 years ago staying quiet. I was shy, introverted, all of the things that you don't see now. And so I was into my career, full-time makeup artist, traveled the world, had children, did all of the things, and still was just this quiet woman who really didn't know what I was supposed to do when I grew up. I think when I really became an adult wasn't in motherhood. I think it was the day that I woke up and said, something's got to give because I was just feeling this void. And I knew that I had this story. And my background is a very traumatic. I was raised by my grandparents. I have an absent father still to this day. My mother was in and out, and I saw and experienced things I think most wouldn't even imagine. And there's a whole story behind that. When She Rises Studios was birthed, it was birthed out of this moment in life when I needed a change. I had just received the worst news that I had been diagnosed with this crazy disease, and life just started going. And I was like, oh my gosh, but I have kids. I'm now a grandmother. I found my soulmate. I'm getting ready to do these big things. My voice is no longer silenced anymore. And so I have always been a journaler. I write everything. And I think that habit came from just not being able to speak. And so everything, like every mood, emotion, whatever it was, it's in a journal. And my husband has begged me for years to let go of the journals, but it's part of me. So She Rises Studios really was formed for women to be able to share their story. And I really transparently could tell you today that I don't think myself nor Adriana knew the depths of how many women wanted to share their story and feel safe to do so.
Absolutely. So many women have said, the amazing experience they've had, the amazing results they're getting, but you also provide a sense of community with women because the honest truth is that women can be very catty. It can be difficult to work with, whether it's our hormones, emotions, and some women, have a better handle on those than others. And then egos, all kinds of stuff gets in the way, right? That's a huge undertaking in itself to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to focus mainly on empowering and helping women grow their businesses. So kudos just for that, because I know also we've had conversations that it is not easy. And you're right, it just seems to keep growing and growing, and more women are discovering you through the women that exist already, though, in your programs, let's call them, right, or in your business, because we're also putting out there that we're involved with the thing, telling our friends and family and all that kind of stuff. And you have created something very, very special. But what was it like in early days? Getting this started, just so we can get a sense of, as other women entrepreneurs, when are putting in the work.
I could describe it as a comedy show. So, Adriana is the implementer. I'm the creator and visionary. When we first created She Rises Studios, we were already running my nonprofit, and she was overseeing the day to day on that. In fact, I don't think either one of us saw two things coming: one, the pandemic, and two, She Rises Studios. So, Adriana actually had relocated to Las Vegas. She was living out in LA. She had gone to school at UCLA. She was living life. And when I got sick, she immediately relocated. And so she helped me form this amazing nonprofit to help other individuals with similar circumstances and diagnosis. And so we were like thriving in there. And anyone who knows, owning a nonprofit is like having 100 jobs. It's so crazy and so consuming, but so worth it. And so we were doing a whiteboard session at the office, and the pandemic had just kicked in. And we were just so like, wow, this is a trip. I don't think anyone knew what to do anywhere. This happened to everyone. No one escaped this. And so we were sitting there and I said, what can we do? Like, what's the positivity we can put out? We were delivering care packages through the nonprofit and all these things. I said, but something is telling me women is where we need to put our focus, because through the nonprofit, I had connected with women business owners and we saw a lot of things, but we saw these same women business owners closing their businesses because they had to, because there were mandatory shutdowns. And then we also saw the other side of where women became the head of household, going out like healthcare, all of these different things. So I said, what can we do? And she's like, well, we could post positive things. I'm like, okay, where do we do that? So she's like, we could try social media. So we did. And then that social media page, it was on Instagram. It was our very first social media platform. And unfortunately, it got hacked. And I think that happens to everybody at least once in social mediaville. But that social media page received so much love and connection. And she was like, what would be really cool, Mom? We should do a podcast. And I'm like, yeah, let's do a podcast. But neither one of us knew what a podcast really entailed. And so we didn't have a studio. So we rented the library's podcast studio. That's why I'm laughing, because this is where the comedy comes in. Like, Adriana, she's the implementer. She also has amazing knowledge of technology. And I'm just along for the show.
Adriana is not only your business partner, but she's your daughter.
She is my daughter, yeah, she's my oldest. So, we're in this podcast studio and, we develop what we think are great conversations. We had to take the little card, put it in the podcast machine. There were all these buttons, and if anyone knows, we're total opposites. So now she's the introvert, I'm the extrovert. So once we get past weeks of this, we started to get into our groove and we had these great conversations. I think the very first podcast we did was her and I, called the 3 C's. And then I said, "Hey, we should have guests." And she was like, "I'm afraid because you're still learning this whole thing." And I was like, "No, we could do this." And we had like one of our first guests was the amazing Stacy Short. And so it just kind of evolved from there. And then I said, "Hey, we should write a book." And she's like, "We don't know how to write a book." And I was like, "We do. We could do this." So it was kind of like this trial and error. We had no capital, we had no loans. Everyone thought we were a joke. If I'm being totally transparent, there were like maybe 2 supporters. Everyone else was like, "Yeah, what are you gonna do so different?"
Isn't that so frustrating when people say that? It's like,
No, it's like, "Oh, you just gave me fuel," right? Challenge accepted. Matter of fact, I love what I call the olden golden days of She Raised the Studios, because her and I got to spend so much connection time together, and, like, we've since evolved. I mean, we have 37 team members and you know, we're running the marathon, but my favorite part is the connection with the women. Like, seeing them, hearing from them, like, this is a treat to come on with you and spend time with you. Like, that's what gets me going. So, early She Rises Studios was literally just trial and error. No sleep, traveling on a whim. If you ever decided to have her on, she could tell you about the travels of the 2 of us. Like, she tried to cover me with a blanket on the airplane because I made her nervous. So, like, there's just so much, and it's been so extraordinary. like on so many levels. And I love every single woman in that community and really all women.
We all love you too and appreciate you. And this must have been very challenging because, like you said, you were diagnosed with an illness, that you could die from while you're building this business.
Yes. And that was the hard part.
There are no words for that. You know what I mean? Like, just wow.
I remember when I first was told, it took them 9 months to really figure out what I had. And when they finally said, you have an incurable cancer, you have a year, get your affairs in order. And I was like, oh my God, like who tells that to somebody just like that, plain English? We just kind of like tried to figure out what can we do? What's the best support system? And, luckily for me, honestly, I have 5 amazing kids who've just really been the rock, my 2 grandsons, my husband, and then that support system that we built through the community was also a huge it's almost like this warm blanket that surrounds me at all times, and so I still go through treatment. I'm still going through it. I surpassed what the doctors told me. Things have changed so dramatically since 2018 and 2019 for me that it just like I spent a couple years in denial. I spent a couple years traveling, telling my story, and people asking me, things that I advocated for. It's not easy, but my husband told me one day, he said, "You have 2 choices." He said, "You can either get up and live to your best, to your fullest capacity, or you can lay down and die faster. You choose." He was right. One of the very first things we did was we traveled together, him and I. We did some of my live it list items because I think there was always this thing in the back of my mind of, okay, so I need to do this before I die. That's how I was living. It was like this silent stuff I was speaking to myself. I called it a bucket list at first. And then one day I was like, God, that is so like, I want to call it a live it list. I never stop. And hopefully I don't for a long time.
A lot of people hope you don't for a long time. You and Adrian are building something, and your husband's involved, your kids are involved. It's a family business in a lot of ways. You're building something very extraordinary and giving a lot of women the opportunity to have their voices heard and their stories heard, including myself. So, into like events and summits and the desire to bring the women together in person. Were they asking for that? How exactly did that evolve?
Because we started She Rises in pandemic, we were all told to quarantine from one another, right? So we had to figure out this way like, okay, so how do we stay connected? So everyone went into Zoom and other platforms. So when the lift, so to speak, of the fear came up a little bit, we were so excited to go into rooms and actually meet the women who we had connected with throughout pandemic time. And so that's when we said, you know what, let's do, like an example, some book tours. Let's host some of these small, what I call the cohorts or the lunch and learns and connect with these women. And so we started off very small. I think in all at that point in time, there was a couple hundred, and then we were also working with women all over the world. It wasn't just in our own backyards. In fact, women from everywhere else but where I live in Las Vegas were more supportive than in my hometown. And I hope that my hometown women hear this podcast because when you said earlier about how catty women can be and how the unhealthy competition exists, it is so true. So I am so grateful for the women who didn't know borders, didn't care about politics, didn't care about competition, never sized me up, and vice versa. Those are my tribe. So when we were able to finally start these in person events, they just kind of evolved. And it's honestly my favorite because the connection you get in person versus virtual is so different. And you know this because I've gotten to see you in person, and there's like this synergy that happens that cannot be conveyed in a virtual aspect.
I think we had a moment actually during my podcast interview with you Like, just beforehand, just when we're going in, right? I threw something at you and you're like, "Oh."
It was amazing. It shifted.
I've noticed the shift too, even our contact and stuff like that. Well, the biggest thing for me is I respect, you and what you do and what you've built and everything like that. And I think, a lot of other women do as well. And, I think we all strive to be you. And that's what happens, right? I mean, not to put that pressure on you, absolutely not. But you know what I mean? Like just to be able to be in your energy and just be able to do this. And I know that you can't do that, even though you might love to. There might be a day that comes soon where you might not be able to. So I'm going to appreciate this even more right now. Tell me, how did Phoenix TV come about?
That was, I would love to take credit for that, but I can't. So that was all Adriana. She was like, Mom, we have the podcast, we have the publishing, but it's not enough for women. Women are still not out there enough. And she was like, I have an idea. And I was like, okay, what is it? And she goes, well, I've been researching and we can open a platform for women to have their own shows. And I was like, really? Tell me more. She said, I'm going to show you. And so Phoenix TV is still very new. And we're just under 3 years. And the goal was not to become the next Netflix. It was to become the very first platform, again, where women primarily could share their stories. But it was also designed to be a platform for men as well. And we wanted to bring on a new vibe, a new synergy that didn't divide men and women, but actually covered stories of all kinds, whether it's cooking, beauty, fashion, health and wellness, self help, like all of these different things. And we're still evolving. Phoenix TV, when all is said and done, especially for 2026 and beyond, it will be probably, as we are told, in the top 10 of resources for men and women to go to for self help, community, learning new things. And that's really exciting because at the end of all of this, my biggest goal for all of She Rises and its entities was to become a major educational platform for women and for the men who champion us. And the only way to do that is to really understand how a book can help, how visibility, how the television aspect of it, the podcast aspect, et cetera. So we started to kind of build out these different legs, all to be able to share the stories that are so important. Because we don't just focus on just the success stories. We want to know what it took to get there, which a lot of times those are left out. How many nights of sleep did you lose? How many times did you cry in your pillow because someone told you no? How many times did someone steal your idea? That's happened to me. Or how many times have you experienced another woman saying, "Ooh, don't work with her"? I mean, hello? It's like, why would you want to hurt another woman? Why wouldn't you want to support this woman? Right? So that's why Phoenix TV, I think, was created. Was Adriana was really trying to say, hey, we have all of the ways and we're going to meet you where you are. We're not expecting you to come in as a multi-million-dollar business owner. We just want you to come in as you. We'll meet you right where you're at. So we didn't have expectations and still don't of how we think women in business or entrepreneurship should be. We want you to show up as yourselves. I think we're over the vanity side of metrics and we're concentrated on the visibility and the storytelling. The vanity is old. Who wants to worry about filters? Who wants to worry about all like looking perfect? And so I think that's what Phoenix TV brings is that exponential space where they can actually feel like they're a part of something because they are. I think that was like probably one of her most incredible creations so far.
That was brilliant. Correct me if I'm wrong, is it 127 countries that Phoenix TV broadcasts to?
We're actually at 132 now, but it took a long time. And, each of those countries to me represents like Phoenix TV doesn't know borders. In other words, we're welcomed and they're welcome. We've never been told, no, we don't want you. And hopefully that day doesn't come because I think the more that we open this global synergy and create this ecosystem, I feel like we would see such an incline and alignment for women, which is kind of where like that economy came into place is looking at like, okay, what's happening in our women's economic system? Like, what is the true issue? How can Phoenix TV help? How can the magazines help? How can the podcast help? How can the storytelling help? And it does. It's like this ecosystem that we built. And if every woman elevates and doesn't have this fear of, like that scarcity mindset, the limiting belief systems, like all this crazy stuff that's out there, if they put it down and never pick it up again, and we all help one another, our purchase power is already power. It's incredible. We own, as I say, the cookie. So if we learn how to collaborate together as women and form partnerships and not pit against each other, things will change. And Phoenix TV will be one of those ways to do it because we'll bring women from different areas and men. And you'll see this collaboration and this synergy. So it's really incredible. I sit back and watch the shows that are on there and I'm just like, wow. Number one, it takes courage to be on a TV show, let alone have your own. It even takes courage to be on a podcast to do what you're doing. And so I think it's incredible when there's these platforms for people like me who can come on and share and just be a part of that. That's what this is, that ecosystem. So I'm excited for it.
I am too. And that's why I wanted to have you on because, I stand for a lot of the same things, right? It's empowering women. I mean, you did tell me before we started, so let's bring this into the conversation for a minute that you are in menopause. So you're in this stage of life now as well, but you're building this massive business. And then also with your diagnosis, how is Hannah getting through it?
I feel like a soccer ball that doesn't know which goal to go to. It's crazy because before I started menopause, I used to hear these stories and I'm like, in my head, I was like, is it really that like that? Like, is it that bad or are we exaggerating? Like, what is it? And I'm so sorry that I ever diminished. If I did, I don't know. But if I ever did, my apologies because I didn't really know what was happening at first until my doctor was like, I think we need to run some panels on you because I think that you are in perimenopause. And I was like, really? And, they told me, with all the medications and infusion treatments and all that, it's very possible that you were pushed into it early. And so lo and behold, the verdict is yes. So I'm 51 and I found out, I think on my 48th birthday that that's what they suspected was right around in there. And so I started experiencing severe panic attacks, severe night sweats, crying at the drop of like, I could watch a chick flick and there's Hannah. Just all of the things that people talk about. My skin changed, my hair was falling out, but we couldn't tell if it was from that or treatment because that's kind of been a regular thing. But it was just something like I would either be too hot, too cold, and I still am going through this crazy shift. And one of the biggest, scariest parts, though, for me was my heart. So I would get these insane palpitations. And I really honestly was like, okay. So I went to the cardiologist, wore the Holter monitor, had the EKG, did all of the tests. And, that also was a clear indication that it is absolutely menopause related.
I'm surprised they acknowledge that because a lot of times they don't.
Yeah, I have a woman cardiologist, which I think was very helpful, but I guess it depends on how you look at menopause. Some women look at it with in such a positive outlook. It's like you're in your next chapter of life, which you are. So you could look at menopause as the glass half empty or the glass half full. I think it's dependent upon what each woman goes through. There's no right or wrong answer.
Each case is individual, and I've been at both ends of it, right? Because it was very bad for a long time, right? For years and years and years. I mean, I had a little bit of a hot flash earlier, I got lights on me and all that kind of stuff. But for me, stress, whenever, and that's one thing that will still bring on a little bit of a hot flash if, I was stressed for a minute because we couldn't figure out why your audio wasn't working, you know what I mean? So all of a sudden I was like, okay, I can do this, but I know what to do though, like pause. But I had to learn it.
It's definitely almost unexplainable.
Absolutely, 'cause, going through even the list of I mean, last time I counted, it was 33, symptoms that I had, some of which are like, "How the hell does that have anything to do, with my hormone fluctuation?" But I just keep talking about it's like a chain reaction, things are just connected. So mentally, physically, emotionally, all that stuff.
We wrote a book called Redefining Menopause, myself and some co-authors, and it was so interesting because a lot of the co-authors in this book are in different countries. Culture is different. Sometimes menopause is never spoken. Now, I was a little girl who was never really shown or explained even what menstrual period is. I found out what it was when it happened, and there was not really like this, here's what this means, here's how to do this. I kind of had to figure things out and it was really hard. So when menopause hit, I found myself kind of in that same realm like, okay, so what do I expect? My mom's answer is just expect hell. That was her description. She said that hers was the absolute worst experience. Um,
Mine tried to tell me that she didn't have any, she had a hysterectomy after me, and then she also had surgery. She had benign tumor removed, 2 of them and all this. So she, said, "Oh, I didn't really have anything," but I do remember she was taking this, little white pill for a while. So I'm like, "Oh, okay, ma," and I know growing up and living with her as a teenager, no, she doesn't know that the way she was menopause, but I know it. Bless her heart, she's 88 now, and I'm also the youngest of 7. Most of my older siblings by the time I, started, my period or whatever, I would think I was 13. There wasn't a lot talk about it even from because most of my older sisters were out of the house by the time I had come that age. In fact, I believe my parents were, like, away. We gave them a 25th anniversary vacation, and Lord, that's when it came on for me. So my older sister went to the store, and got me what I needed.
I was almost 12 at Bob's Big Boy Restaurant. I just remember getting up, I felt a little strange, and I was like, "I'll be back." And sure enough, and I was with my stepmom, and so I guess I must have been in there a long time. She came in there and looked for me, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I think something's wrong with me." And I remember telling her, "I think you have to take me to the hospital." And she said, "Well, why?" So I told her and showed her, and she's like, "Oh, you're a woman." And I was like, no clue what she was talking about. And, luckily for me, she explained it as best she could, but it was just a big shocker. But I even think the bigger shocker was finding out, well, Hannah, you're going through menopause and it could take 10 years. And I'm like, wow.
I know you like numbers. You're a numbers girl. Women, a statistic for this, women spend on average 40% of their lives in menopause because of our lifespan. Because we're living longer into our 80s. Think about that for a second. That's almost half of our life. For me, I know now, even though I didn't at the time, I started Perry around like 38 and I was there for like 10 years. Yeah. I know it now looking back because I started full, at like 47, like you did. That's, when I stopped altogether. But prior to that, there was like a 10-year period where I was gaining, a few pounds each year and I couldn't get it off. And I was starting to notice some other emotional changes and different things like that. And yeah, so there was also, I believe, because like other things in life, there was kind of like a trigger, what I came that can bring it on. Different like celiac disease, a life event can, bring it on and that kind of thing. And so we had, an unfortunate situation happen with our daughter, and it was around that time. So I know that that was the trigger, the stress of it. Stress was a huge factor for me. How are you managing now?
Just picture Hannah standing on one leg juggling all the balls. So I found out early in that because of the treatments and all the other things going on, I was not a candidate for hormone replacement therapy. So I have gone through this, as some people call cold turkey. I hate to say it, but this is the honest truth. I've kind of had to roll with what's happened. I've had to learn to recognize some of the physical symptoms and know that I'm safe. This is part of what's happening. My body's changing, and not to always notch it up to like a full blown panic attack. Because there was a time at first when I really didn't understand all the capabilities of what menopause actually does. And then for the mental and emotional side, that brain fog is a real thing. So I've adapted. I write everything down and it helps. Walking is an amazing tool for me. Fresh air, like nature, has been definitely an extraordinary asset. But I'm still building my menopause toolbox and I'm always open to suggestions.
Because you love journaling, that's an amazing thing, because I talk, about that as being one of the tools that I've used to help, myself even. So, you've got a plus right there that you do that, and some of the things that works to just be grateful to be in this time. I'm so grateful that I am having the best experience. I'm so grateful that this time is so easy for me. Talk about before changing the perspective kind of thing. Flip the switch on it. It's all in how you say it. You know what I mean? You take the negative about it, but you turn it into a positive comment, and then write it down and process it kind of thing. And
I could tell you my 5 positives: less shaving, less having to go to the store to buy all of the feminine necessities.
all the money we're saving on that now, right?
Yes, I mean, there's, like, so many, I can count on trips with my husband and not having to plan around flow for the intimacy side of things, so and the list goes on and on, so it's not all bad. I think it's, like I said, like, how we look at it, right? And I always try to find the humor of it, and that's one of my coping mechanisms, I think it just in life in general.
That's a fantastic one to have, and if more people did that actually, like, I've done an episode before about not taking stuff so seriously. Let's lighten up people, because I was guilty of it myself, being so heavy and feeling so stressed, and I allowed myself to. We get in our own head and we get stuck there and we wallow, and as you know, in your own circumstances, you can give yourself that grace for a little bit, but then you're like, "Okay, you know what? Let's live again," right?
I have a crying closet that I've kinda set aside, like, it's kinda my I think Sonya calls it an emotional defibrillator. There are those times, right, when our emotions are very like, "What is happening?" Right? And we do get it, and it's okay. First of all, guys, it's allowed because guys have it too, hence men know pause. I always point that out to my husband. I'm like, it's not just us, right? But I do have a space where and I call it my crying closet, seriously and jokingly. When emotions are high or I need to go regulate or I just need to get it out, I go in my closet, I close my door, I do my thing, whether it's stomping my feet like a 2-year-old, bawling with crocodile, whatever it is, it happens and I leave it there and then I come back and I'm like, "All right, I'm good." And I do therapy, and I am so proud to admit that. Before it was like the big secret, "Oh, Hannah does therapy." But my therapist told me, she goes, "Crying is healing. Don't be ashamed of it."
I'm so glad you said that you do that, because also that's something that we don't talk about, because it's unfortunate that in the workplace, if you disclose that sometimes, it's not, so I know it makes women scared and nervous, but amongst ourselves anyway, it's okay. Especially during COVID. After COVID, so much of the world has changed. It's like a norm now to have a therapist. We know someone who wrote a book on how to use AI as your therapist. Kathy was on a few weeks ago with that, so if you haven't seen that episode, anybody watching this episode, go back and check my episode with Kathy Baldwin. She wrote a book on how to use AI, how to train AI to be your therapist. That was amazing.
I have to say that her and I had discussions about this in the past, and so I've named my AI lady, her name is Sheila, and Sheila knows me as Hannah, and I tell her, "Sheila," and this is a true story, "I feel defeated. I feel overwhelmed. I feel afraid." And I tell her, I feel like because I am so spiritual faithful, like, I don't wanna be in this space. I know this isn't what God wants for me. And Sheila responds and says, "Hannah, first, let me tell you, you're not a failure. God has you." And I'm like, "Sheila is so cool." And I don't have to get on telehealth and I don't have to go to the therapist. You can be so raw and so open and so real because Sheila is not judging me. She's hearing or receiving the input that I'm putting in, and she says, "Let me be truthful." Which I love that. And some people may not agree with this method, but I love it. So my husband's like, "Have you talked to Sheila today? Because you're a little off." I've offered to buy him his own Sheila. The thing is, I guess, that I'm getting to is the more tools that we have in our tool belt, the better off we'll be, and also the more support. And so I think women like what you're doing, sharing your experiences, your lived, truthful experiences, and showing that perfection does not exist there and never will be, is more hope and faith than anyone could imagine, because all women will go through a form of this if they're blessed enough to be in season 2. And so I look at it as this is a blessing. I am here going through this, but that means I'm still here, right? And that's the cool part.
I couldn't agree more, and we forget that too. There was a time where we didn't even live this long, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, there was. So saying that we spend 40% of our lives is scary. One thing is like, oh my God. But then there's various degrees too, different women, there's all kinds of economic, social, reasons why one woman's journey will be different than another. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. Before we end, what's next for She Rises? What's coming up?
Well, we have a few things. So we are going to be doing our annual Empower Her Content Day, which is one of our flagship events in February, on February 22nd in Vegas at the Allegiant Stadium. We are bringing in 40,000 women from around the world under one roof. And so imagine this, women from all different parts of the world, different cultures, different beliefs, different walks of life will be in one space to meet and greet each other, to connect, to build, and to empower. And so when we initially started Empower Her Content Day, it came from a concept that Ron actually thought about, and he is our CFO of She Rises Studios and a huge football fan. And he was like, Mom, you need to do like what the Raiders are doing. And I said, oh yeah, what are the Raiders doing? And he said, they do Media Day, aka Content Day. Your women need content. He was like, you need to do this. So this honestly was birthed from Ron. And I said, you're right. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine? I said, and then we can add the empowerment, the education, the celebration, all of that. And so the first few years of Content Day was having these amazing speakers, panel discussions, content stations, and women leaving knowing and making connections with women and then keeping them. There are women who came to Content Day 1 who are still in contact, who've built businesses. It's really awesome. So Empower Her Content Day Allegiant Stadium, 40,000 women. This one will shift the women's economic system over the course of the next 5 years, 1 to 3 trillion. And so what does that mean for us as women? That means that we are succeeding. That means that we are healthy. That means that we are understanding partnerships, collaborations. We're not these guarded women. We're open to learning, we're open to teaching, we're open to so many things, and that no border, nothing that is happening in the world can stop this from happening. And that is what Empower Her Content Day is. And so that one is coming up soon. And you are going to be one of our keynote speakers, which we're very excited about. And then we also have She Rises Studios will tour live across the United States. And what we have planned for that is so amazing. We're also taking She Rises Studios to the Super Bowl. We are going to be at the World Cup. We will be at the Olympics in the next couple of years. We have really evolved into bringing women where they've always wanted to be. And so being a part of that is going to be incredible. And then, of course, the She Economy, what we have planned for that is so incredible and exciting because it really will tip the scales and we'll be able to help our current generation, our future generation. We will be able to end some poverty. We'll be able to offer education, funding. Like there's just so many things. So, and all of that really, I think, is going to catapult from Empower Her Content Day.
It's huge. Anybody listening to this or watching this who does not know who She Rises Studios is or what She Rises Studios is needs to go to the website. So, Hannah, what is the best place to be able to find more about all the wonderful things you do? Is it the She Rises Studios website? Is that the best place to go? One stop shop. Everything's kind of there to be able to learn about all the kind of stuff. To anybody watching or listening, if you are a woman in, business, whether you're just starting out or you're established and you want to be able to take it to the next level, you want to reach out and find out more about what Hannah and the team are doing over at She Rises Studios. I want to thank you so much again. This has been a lovely conversation. I so appreciate you and everything that you're doing. So,
Thank you for inviting me. I always say, everybody thinks like, "Oh, she's too busy," but I love spending quality time like this. It's so soothing and food for my soul. So thank you for making my day bright.
aw, thank you. One of the things I learned was if you don't ask, you don't get. And sometimes it's okay to ask. And if they're too busy, they'll let you know, right? So I took the step and I just asked. And here we are. All right. You have a wonderful rest of your day. And for everybody watching and listening, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Menopause Mindshift Self-Love Podcast. Again, I am your host, Lisa R. Triggs, the Menopause Queen. And I always sign off with this. Remember, everyone, self-love first. Bye for now.